And welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. Glad you're with us. We're here every week meeting interesting people and talking about topical issues. We welcome back two old friends this week.
Two old friends talking about a very topical issue, prosecutorial misconduct. We see all the time news reports about cases that have been affected one way or another by at least the claim of prosecutorial misconduct. It's a very common claim of defendants who have been convicted and their cases on appeal, and they're looking for anything to try to overturn it on the one hand. On the other hand, it actually happens sometimes, and we've got two guys here that are going to tell us about it, David Prater and Robert McCampbell.
Should be an interesting show. It's coming up today on The Verdict. Stay with us.
In driving rain, blistering heat, and bitter cold, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, Chesapeake drills non-stop for natural gas on American soil. Chesapeake drills more new gas wells than anyone else, and from those wells collects the most drilling information and acquires more 3D seismic images, leveraging every efficiency to improve the odds of finding more natural gas every day with every well we drill. The better job we do of discovering bigger reserves of clean-burning American natural gas, the greater the prosperity of our nearby communities, our state, and our nation. And as long as there are more gas reserves to be found here in the U.S., we will never rest. Chesapeake. Natural gas wins the day.
Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate. We're accountants. We do taxes, business valuations, estate planning, and consulting. And we're right here in Oklahoma, working with the owners of small and medium-sized businesses. Steve Wilsey and Stuart Meyer have the resources and the experience. Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate in Oklahoma City and Tulsa.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
Very pleased today to have two of our favorite guests come back for another appearance. On my right is the Honorable David Prater, the Oklahoma County District Attorney. David did his law work and his undergraduate work at the University of Oklahoma. He then had a varied background, all in preparation, imminent preparation for his current position. He was in private practice. He was a police officer. He was with an assistant at the Oklahoma County District Attorney's Office. He was at the Oklahoma Attorney General's Office, all leading to his election in 2007 as Oklahoma County District Attorney. This is his third appearance on The Verdict. David, welcome back.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
On my left is my partner, Robert McCampbell. Robert is making his fourth appearance, but that doesn't include three shows that he co-hosted when Mick was off on city business. Robert did his undergraduate work at Vanderbilt University, his law work at Yale University, been in private practice, and also been, he is the former United States District Attorney for the Western District of Oklahoma. And I'll just have to personally say I'm certainly proud to have him back with us at my place, and offices right next door to me, which makes it even nicer. Welcome back.
Well, it's great to be here, Kent.
Well, what have you been doing since you left the U.S. Attorney's Office, Robert?
Well, it's been a change. I tell people the difference is my last week as U.S. Attorney, the most interesting case I handled, it was a triple murder. My first week back in private practice, most interesting case I handled, it concerned the Perishable Agricultural Commodities Act. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. But the truth is, I'm really glad to be back at the firm, back with my old partners, and enjoy my work.
David, have things going at your office?
Well, real well, just busy as always, and we're always in the trenches, it seems, but things are going very well. We have a office of very hard-working assistants just down there every day working hard.
Refresh our viewers on the size of your office, number of lawyers and non-legal staff, and how many cases you're involved in
Sure.
on an annual basis.
We have 150 total employees, about 60 lawyers, $10.3 million budget. We handle approximately 15,000 cases a year, felonies, misdemeanors, cases related to juveniles, and the civil cases that we handle in the office, so it's quite busy.
We wanted to spend some time on the Behenna case. Why don't you give us some background on exactly what this case is about?
Sure. Lieutenant Michael Behenna, a young man who grew up in Edmond. Father's a retired OSBI agent. Mother is still a prosecutor in the Western District of Oklahoma in the U.S. Attorney's Office, Vicki Behenna. Michael ended up stationed in Iraq, and he came to a situation where he was in charge of a detainee who was a suspect in the murder of several soldiers in Iraq. And there came a time when Michael had to shoot that detainee. And the big question was whether or not this was self-defense, whether that detainee was actually going for Michael's weapon when he was shot and killed. There was a trial that was held a couple months ago in a military tribunal. Something very unusual occurred during that trial. The prosecution's witness heard Michael Behenna testify, and the night before he had met with the prosecution and basically laid out a scenario wherein he had analyzed all of the available forensic evidence and had a theory of how everything went down. When Michael Behenna testified as to this being self-defense, and this detainee had grabbed for Lieutenant Behenna's weapon and he fired in self-defense, the prosecution's expert told the prosecutors, that's exactly the way I theorize this happened. That's exactly the way I told you. So in fact, he had agreed with not only Lieutenant Behenna, but also the defense expert that had agreed with Lieutenant Behenna based upon all the forensic evidence available to scene. Well, here's the unusual thing that happened. The military prosecutors, rather than disclosing this to the defense, which they had a legal duty to do so, basically dismissed their witness. And the defense lawyer, as this witness was leaving the courthouse area, the defense lawyer said, "Where are you going? Aren't you going to be called in rebuttal?" And he said, "No, I've been dismissed, and it's too bad. I would have been your best witness." And the defense lawyer said, "Well, what do you mean?" He said, "I can't tell you. You'll have to ask the prosecutors." Well, this was not disclosed again to the defense. A guilty verdict ultimately came back in the case, and Lieutenant Behenna was sentenced by the tribunal to 25 years to do for the murder of this detainee. This prosecution witness was so disturbed by what he had seen occur in this case that he emailed and called a friend of his who happened to be a Supreme Court justice in the state of New York. And he said, "You must get back with the prosecutors and demand that they disclose that to the defense." Well, ultimately, after the guilty stage of the trial, the guilt stage of the trial, it was finally disclosed to the defense. But unfortunately, it was after the verdict, obviously, and the judge chose not to disturb the verdict, which was extremely unusual. So he's in Leavenworth at this time.
One of the things that's really interesting about this case is that it's so similar to the Senator Ted Stevens case out of Washington, which now has been dismissed by the Department of Justice. The facts are very similar. In the Ted Stevens case, too, there was a government witness who was going to be favorable for the defense, and instead of calling that witness, the prosecutors told the witness, just get on a plane and go back home. And in that case, the Department of Justice chose to just dismiss that conviction against Senator Stevens.
So similar data or similar information, but two completely different results.
Completely different results.
Huh.
Well, where are we on the Behenna case then, either of you? Where are we? Is there an appeal pending? And is that, now we're dealing with the Uniform Code of Military Justice here, I take it?
Yes, sir.
We're not dealing with our normal criminal laws that we're familiar with. We're dealing with military justice.
That's correct. It's my understanding the base commander is reviewing the verdict and reviewing the proposed sentence by the tribunal, and they're awaiting pronouncement of his decision, to my understanding.
The
Go ahead,
procedure is different. The constitutional principle is the same. The due process clause from the Constitution says that the defendant is entitled to receive this favorable evidence. And so that part is the same whether you're in civilian court or military court.
Now, let's distinguish this situation, which constitutes alleged prosecutorial misconduct, as was alleged in the Stevens case. Oh, well, and brought about the dismissal. From a civil action. Robert, if you're trying a civil case and a witness comes up with something you didn't really expect and you haven't put the witness on yet and the other side has had full discovery access to your witnesses and documents, do you have a duty to tell the other side about this unfavorable witness?
No, it's a completely different situation. And the reason it's different is because a prosecutor has a special duty. And the most eloquent setting forth of that duty, Justice Sutherland, back in the 30s, a Supreme Court case called Berger against the United States. I know David's familiar with it. And what Justice Berger said, the duty of a prosecutor is not that he shall win a case, but that justice shall be done. And it is that higher duty of the prosecutor that makes this case special and different from the ordinary civil case.
Yeah, the client of the prosecutor is the people.
It's the sovereignty, that's correct.
Sovereignty. And they just want justice. They don't necessarily want a win or a loss. They want the right thing to be done.
That's exactly right. As with your client being the sovereignty, justice is your ultimate goal. It's not winning or losing, it's justice. And that's difficult many times because prosecutors are so incredibly, and all lawyers really, so incredibly competitive. So when you bring a young lawyer into your office, you've got to talk to them over and over and over about the fact that we seek justice. We are the minister of justice. We've got to do right. It's not about winning and losing.
Where is Behenna today?
He's in Leavenworth Prison in Kansas.
You're watching The Verdict. We'll be right back with more with our guests Robert McCampbell and David Prater.
I'm Mike Larson. I'm an artist, and I am Chickasaw. We were fortunate enough to start doing more and more work with the Chickasaws, largely because of Bill Addertubby. We developed, with his help and with his graces, a series of paintings on the Chickasaw elders. I would interview them, I would do sketches, we would talk about their history, some of it phenomenal, and then we would come away from that, go home, and I would do paintings. First thing I will look at when I look at a person is their eyes. You look at their eyes, you look at their hands, you can tell everything you need to about a person. These people portrayed to me strength and character, filled with an integrity and a joy of life. The wonderful thing about it, aside from the paintings, is the way that it brought me back into the Chickasaw family. It has made me more Chickasaw. It has made me more Chickasaw than I ever thought I could be.
Home values are down in some states, but not in Oklahoma. Oklahoma's home values have increased 4.2% during the past 12 months. Unlike some states where home values have decreased as much as 20%. Good thing you're in Oklahoma. There may be real estate problems in some states, but there has never been a better time than now to buy or sell a home in Oklahoma. One of the most affordable states in the country, Oklahomans are buying and selling homes every day, and an Oklahoma Realtor can show you how. Good thing you're in Oklahoma.
That land next door was a mess. Take more than a lawnmower to revive that land. I heard the oil and natural gas people was cleaning up old oil sites, and it wouldn't cost us a plug nickel. Oh yes, sir, it was quite a revival. The whole church showed up, want to make a playground for the kids. It sure is a blessing.
Welcome back to The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers are visiting with David Prater and Robert McCampbell. Kent, where to now?
Had a little summary of the Behenna case, and I'd be interested in asking these guys now. We know where the case is at the current time. What should, as you see it, what should happen, Robert, hereafter?
Well, if not a dismissal, then at a minimum, a new trial. The fact is that because this crucial evidence did not come forth, Lieutenant Behenna has not yet had a fair trial. And there's no way to know if his lawyer had had these facts at his disposal, what the lawyer could have done. There's no way to know how a jury would have reacted to the facts. And that's the point of the exercise, is bring all the facts into the courtroom and let it be decided in a fair trial.
Well, let's talk about prosecutorial misconduct in general. David, how often do you see that? It would seem like that almost any defendant who doesn't have the trial end up the way he wanted would allege that had occurred. Do you see it a lot?
You see it alleged quite often in our state courts, but very rarely does the Court of Criminal Appeals find that truly prosecutorial misconduct has occurred. They do rarely find it. It's unfortunate when it has occurred in a trial, and again, like I said earlier, we work against that with every effort we can from the moment a young lawyer enters our office, and we maintain training and try to control that to the greatest extent. But it is alleged often. Very rarely is it found or verified by the Court of Criminal Appeals, fortunately.
Well, I was going to ask each of you, since both you are still now supervising an office, and you did supervise an office for a number of years of prosecutors. It seems like both of these instances of prosecutorial misconduct have kind of arisen in the heat of battle, at the time when a lot's going on and there are a lot of things pulling on you and distracting you, including my earpiece. But what do you guys do in that regard to make sure that your young lawyers know what to do, or your subordinate lawyers, I should say, know what to do and know how to handle it? And what kind of supervisory role do you play?
I'm very sympathetic with the prosecutor. A criminal trial is a really intense experience. Things are happening in a hurry. Prosecutors are hostile and aggressive, and that's a good thing. That's what you want in a prosecutor, but it has to be tempered with justice. And one of the things I'd tell young prosecutors is, when you walk into that courtroom and you say, I'm an assistant U.S. attorney, I represent the United States, after that, the very next thing you say, the judge is going to believe you, and the jury is going to believe you because of your special duties as a prosecutor, and you've always got to remember to uphold that special status.
David?
You know, that's exactly right. We have a greater goal and a greater responsibility, and that is to seek justice and to only seek justice. And really, I think you supervise by leading, and you lead by example. And you let those prosecutors in your office know that you do not cheat, that you believe that justice is the ultimate goal of the office, and you don't really measure the success of any individual assistant district attorney in your office by the number of convictions, but how they look at their cases and how they seek justice.
Well, if each of you had been faced with what happened in the Behenna case, what would you have done? David, let's start with you. Well, right at that instance when that prosecutor finds out.
I can tell you I've done that before, and had to stand up, ask the judge for a recess, and had a conference with the defense counsel. And you immediately tell them, number one, if the witness on the witness stand has just misstated a fact that you were aware of, or in fact something came to your attention that was in fact exculpatory, or would be what would be considered Brady material, Brady versus Maryland material, which is exculpatory evidence that is required to be disclosed to the defense. You stop right then and you let that be known. You've got to do it immediately.
Now, if one of your lawyers did what the prosecutor is alleged to have done in the Behenna case, you as a supervising lawyer, what would you have done? What would you do?
Well, I've also had situations in the courthouse, not something that one of my lawyers did, but ultimately it became aware to me, came to my attention that we had in fact had a verdict that was not in fact just. And I went to the judge and said, we need to do something about this, and we basically fixed it at that moment with a plea in the case after a verdict had already been returned.
In the state's favor?
Yes, sir, in the state's favor, but we felt that the defendant was going to receive a much harsher penalty than what they truly deserved, and so we went ahead and entered a plea agreement with the defendant at that point. So you always have to be aware of what's going on, and it is fluid and it's constant. And like Mr. McCampbell said, you're in the heat of battle and you need to be fighting hard, but you need to fight fairly, and you need to maintain that sense of justice.
Robert, what training, if any, do people in your position get when you're in the U.S. Attorney's Office?
The best training is leadership, and if the young lawyers know that big principle, that they've got a special duty as a prosecutor, and they know that principle goes all the way to the top, and the top leadership at that office believes in that bedrock principle, that's the best training. And then you've got to trust that prosecutor in the courtroom to do what's right under whatever circumstances arise, because there's no way to train everything.
Have you had personal experiences in a similar situation?
You know, I had a situation very similar to what the district attorney just mentioned. I had a witness who said something in the middle of the trial that I knew wasn't right, had to call a recess, inform the judge, inform the defense counsel, and then watch my witness get torn up on cross-examination. and as a competitor, you don't like to do it, but as a prosecutor, it's your duty.
Well, it's not about wins and losses at that point.
It's not about wins and losses at that point, and you can't take your eye off the ball.
Are our law schools doing an adequate job in training young lawyers that come out to fill prosecution roles to bring out this side of the practice, the ethics side of the criminal ethics side of the practice?
You know, I think the law schools are doing a fine job, but really ultimately a law school can't prepare someone for every area of law they may go out and practice in. So really when they enter a prosecutor's office, really in our case as an intern, we start to develop that attitude early on and that training early on as an intern and even a volunteer sometimes in our office, and start to instill that attitude that we just seek justice and we don't cheat. It's not about wins and losses, just seeking justice. So the law schools are doing a great job, and we get great recruits from those law schools here locally. Very pleased to tell you that. But really, the main training regarding prosecutorial misconduct or the avoidance of that is starts the moment they step inside that prosecutor's office's door.
What about you, Robert?
There's nothing you can read in a book, there's nothing you can hear in a lecture that will teach you these things. The law schools do an excellent job bringing out law students with the right skills, but absolutely, it's got to be in the courtroom, it's got to be talking with older prosecutors who have been in those situations, and that's how you truly learn as a young lawyer what you need to do.
How do you make the decision between the ultimate penalty against the government, if you will, the dismissal of the case as has happened in the Stevens case, and then, or on the other hand, a new trial? What would tilt the balance one way or the other?
You have to look at the totality of the circumstances, really, and what's fair. And sometimes you just have to take that hit. That's why we're in these positions, and people place us in those positions of trust because they trust us. And sometimes it's hard to do, but ultimately you have to sit down and say, what occurred here is not fair, and even though it seems unfair to the state of Oklahoma, we're going to have to dismiss this case.
Fascinating subject today. Thank you guys for bringing it to light to us.
Thanks, guys.
All right, Robert McCampbell, David Prater. Kent and I will be back with a final word right after this.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett and Kent Myers. We are wrapping up a show on prosecutorial misconduct. We talked with Oklahoma County District Attorney David Prater and former U.S. Attorney Robert McCampbell, and heard about the Behenna case and really got into the issue pretty in depth.
Well, that's a case that's gotten a lot of publicity both here locally and nationally, as a matter of fact. It will be really interesting to see what happens at that next level, which is basically the post-commander level. That commanding officer can do just about anything he or she wants to do in regard to that conviction. He can set it aside. He can order a new trial. He can he can order the charges dismissed as just almost unfettered authority. And I'm sure that the Behenna family and those that are close to the case are hoping for some significant relief out of that. I just can't imagine what it'd be like in those kinds of circumstances to see your son facing a 25-year sentence over something as disputed and as that, particularly not whether the shooting took place or not, but was there justification for it, and did the experts think there was justification for it?
We also have a website we'd love to see you go to tell us about a show that you'd like to see. Our web address is theverdict.tv. You can go there and give us a topic for an upcoming show. And speaking of upcoming shows, we got next week's show.
We do. We're going to hear about what's going on at the Oklahoma Bar Association next week with the current president, John Parsley, and a past president, Bill Grimm. They're going to be here to tell us all about what's going on at the Bar Association. There is a lot going on, and you might like to hear a little bit more about how the practice law is regulated.
Look forward to that. For Kent Myers, I'm Mick Cornett. Thanks for joining us today on The Verdict. We'll see you next week with another show.
The preceding program was produced exclusively for the Cox Channel.